Hello, this is the Net Hero podcast. I'm Sumit Bose, and this podcast is all about business and doing better for the planet. It's not an eco podcast, we're not green warriors. We believe that business is good and business will make the difference, but it's about holding businesses to account. So, if you're interested in what we're doing to try and make things better, to stop our polluting of the planet, to stop our global warming, to stop us driving around in cars that are polluting the air that we breathe, this is the podcast for you. It's all about business, it's about invention, it's about entrepreneurs, scientists, and frankly, there's a few wild cards as well. Do hope you enjoy listening to this episode, and make sure you subscribe and follow us on your social media platforms. And please check out our two news websites, energylivenews.com and Future Net Zero. On with the show. Hello, welcome to this episode about one of the colours, the fundamental colours of the planet. Green. Green grass of home. Yeah, it's a green planet. And we are obviously trying to go green. Now, you've not been under a stone, unless you've been under a stone, I should say, you'll have noticed there's been a lot of talk about whether net zero is worth doing. We've had Kemi Badenoch now saying the Climate Change Act isn't the right thing. We've had, obviously, Trump saying, guys, it's the biggest con in history. We've had Tony Blair a few months ago saying it can't work in this current state. We've even had Boris Johnson talking about it and saying maybe he, who was a real big advocate of net zero, was saying perhaps he pushed too fast too soon. The realities of net zero are pretty simple. It's going to cost a lot of money. And we kind of obviously have to accept that. But I suppose one of the things that is in doubt, apart from technology and stuff, is trust. So when you get a energy contract, when you go and buy energy and it says it's green, well, how green is it? This is one thing that has been a big issue in the industry for many years. And if you're from the industry rather than a casual listener, you'll kind of know about it. You may have heard terms like REGO and things like that. Basically, how do we prove that we as consumers are getting the right deal in terms of what we think we're buying? Because as more and more people want to turn green, they want to buy green supply. But the truth is, there's not enough green supply for all of us. Well, there's a man here who has come up, I would call him a genius actually, because he's a data scientist. He's been around the world. He's got about 47 PhDs. Is that right, Joe?
Just one, actually.
Yeah, well, it could have been 47, the amount you know. And he's come up with a system that basically could give us confidence by telling us exactly how much of our green energy is green at any one time. So it's my pleasure to welcome Joe Kwiatkowski. Oh, I'm going to get this right. Kwiatkowski. How's that?
Very good. Excellent.
And from your company is called Matched, correct?
We are matched, yes, and we are bringing verifiable ratings to renewable supply.
So not match the dating, but in a way it's a bit of dating. You're going to tell us why green energy, let's start with the first thing, how green is the thing that I mentioned in the beginning. And loads of people still can't give a definitive answer. So before we talk about what you've done with your clever bit of software, what's your answer to how green is green?
Well, at one level, we know that very easily. The grid is now 50% renewable, and tremendous progress has been made, and it's been phenomenally exciting to watch. 3% renewable 20 years ago, and now 50% renewable. It's been an incredible journey, and there's a huge amount to celebrate there. And that is what Matched is about, is to help celebrate that, and in particular to draw attention to the suppliers that are doing the most to genuinely decarbonize their supply. And we see lots of success stories that are not properly being told right now because we're working within outdated regulation that doesn't distinguish between the suppliers that are making genuine efforts and those that are just doing checkbox exercises.
Let's explain that. So I mentioned earlier the term REGO. So can you explain when the system was first, I mean, it's probably about 20, 25 years, maybe that long ago, I'm not sure. But when the idea of the grid was changing first was brought up, that we were going to move from fossil fuels and start to see more wind turbines and more solar. There was an idea about how do you kind of measure the green that is being produced, what green energy is.
Hmm.
So, what exactly is the problem with the system as it is today?
Hmm. Hmm. Should I give you a potted history and then I'll describe the
Please
problem?
do. Yeah, absolutely. The listeners would love it.
Very quickly then. 20 years ago, actually just over 20 years ago, we instituted renewable energy guarantees of origin. This is a system that's managed and run by Ofgem, and it is an issuance of certificates for every megawatt hour of renewables that are generated. And it's a good system because power is otherwise just a fungible commodity. There is no distinction between a megawatt hour that comes from gas, nuclear, or renewables.
Of course.
So certificates are a valuable, an essential service to the market. The problem is that 20 years ago, as a very reasonable measure at that time, we ended up with rules that only required annual reconciliation,
Right.
which is to say that suppliers are perfectly within their rights to buy certificates, say from solar generated in the summer, and use that to offset customer demand in the winter. And if those two volumes were to match, then you could go so far as to say that you're 100% renewable. And
Hang
then,
on a second. Let's explain it because this is a key point. So let's choose a simple number. Let's choose 100 megawatts. We're not real, but anyway, we'll go with that figure. So you do a deal with me, and you say, "Hi, Sumit, your business. I'm going to give you green energy all year." And I say, "Right, it's 100 megawatts I need." Yep.
correct.
You are a supplier. In the summer, you're pulling in lots, maybe 150, 200, right? Whatever
Mhm,
you're pulling in over a few months. In the
mhm,
winter, there's no sun, the wind's not blowing. You
mhm.
are basically providing me energy that's come from either gas or in the old days coal, correct?
Correct. Correct.
So even though I've asked for 100,
Hmm.
that's pure green, you
Hmm.
could have given me 50 that's um, fossil fuels,
Hmm.
but you could have given me 150 in the summer of that, and you just add it up and just say that cancels it out. Is that how it worked?
That's how it works. Yeah. So perhaps to go into just another level of detail, all of this emanates from the fuel mix disclosure. And on the fuel mix disclosure, which is a regulated requirement of suppliers, renewables, as measured through these REGOs, these certificates,
Yeah,
are reconciled on an annual basis, which allows this offsetting, essentially. Every other component of the fuel mix disclosure is based on power contracts, which is different. Power is settled on a half hourly basis.
yeah.
That is the nature of the supply business, is settling supply and demand on a half hourly basis. So we have a problem. It wasn't a problem in 2003 when renewables were 3% of the grid and REGOs were first being instituted. It is now a problem. Renewable generation swings anywhere from 5% to 80% of total generation. And actually, increasingly, we're getting entire hours on the grid where we are 100% renewable by some measures. So it wasn't a problem 20 years ago. The system has been of use in the interim, but it is now a problem. And the solution is very, very simple. It's not rocket science. The solution is to take this system that is reconciled on an annual basis and just do it in exactly the same way we do everything else in the power sector, which is to say, reconcile on a half hourly basis. And when you do that, you end up with different numbers, and that's what we've done here at Matched.
So hang on a second. If you look at what you've just said there, um, the data, let's get to the data before we explain how it all works. Who does the original, here's how many hours of green energy I've put out? Is it a solar farm itself? Is it a bunch of wind farms? How do they record it? Does it go to Ofgem? Explain that process so that the viewers and listeners can understand where the data comes from first to prove just how much has come from renewable generation.
Sure thing, yes. Well, the primary measure in this context is the REGO database
Right.
as managed by Ofgem. So renewable generators are invited to register their generation with Ofgem, and in return, they are awarded certificates, one certificate for every megawatt hour.
Okay, so I've got 10 megawatt hours. I've got a solar farm, whatever. I've
Hmm.
got I've got 10 certificates, yeah? Basically, is that
Exactly,
right?
exactly. That goes into a pool of certificates um, from which suppliers procure. So
Okay,
the compliance period is April through the end of March every year, and suppliers will figure out how much customer demand they have served,
got you.
and therefore how many REGOs, these
Yeah,
certificates they want to buy. It's as simple as
right. And the people who are actually uh, giving these certificates, these can be the actual assets, right? These are the people who own, whether it's a wind farm or a solar farm or a hydro plant. It's those people, correct?
correct, correct,
And sometimes they are suppliers in vertical, and sometimes they're not. Yeah.
correct. Could be either.
So none of the suppliers, let's be clear, they're not doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything illegal. This is the system that exists.
These are the rules.
They're
These are
using the rules, yeah. But what you're saying is the rules are now not fit for purpose. Why? Because you could say, actually, if you have agreed to give me 100 megawatts over the year, and you do give me 100 megawatts, but actually it was
mm,
150 and 50 was that, it kind of
yeah.
cancels out, doesn't it?
Well, it used to back when we were 3% renewable on the grid, back when the system was first instituted. That line of reasoning was, I presume, precisely why we ended up with the system that we have. Thing is, it doesn't work like that anymore. The challenge of our day is no longer just generating renewables. It is increasingly generating renewables in the right place and at the right time. That is
Mm,
the challenge, which requires diversification of supply across clean technologies and flexibility, both infrastructural flexibility, grid scale storage, and consumer-led flexibility, 10 or 12 gigawatts by 2030 in the Clean Power Plan. So we now have a new challenge ahead of us. We're at 50% renewables as a
yep,
grid. The
yep,
next half of the journey is, in many ways, the hardest
of
half of the
course.
journey,
Yep.
because this is the point where the intermittency of renewables, really begins to bite. This is the point where we really need to invest at all levels in flexibility. And herein is the problem. The current regulation ignores both of these. It ignores intermittency because it suggests that annual reconciliation is sufficient. That's not the case. And it does nothing to incentivize the changes that we need with urgency for our Clean Power 2030 plans. Um, so, and it causes other problems. The existing regulation, it's non-physical. You can't move solar energy
Yeah, of
from the
course you
summer
can't.
to the
Yeah,
winter unless you have a lot of long duration storage. We
yeah.
don't. It's a problem because consumers feel misled. Many consumers take the marketing claims at face value, and they rightly feel disappointed when they find out that the truth is more nuanced. Another fraction of consumers never distrust the claims from the get-go, and that's a different problem, but a real and growing problem. And as I say, the other major issue here is that we are not properly recognizing the suppliers that are genuinely decarbonizing their power. These tremendous advances over the last 5, 10 years are not properly recognized by the market because these suppliers are marketed identically to other suppliers, some of whom are also 100% renewable, but who are not genuinely decarbonizing. They are instead stockpiling certificates in the summer so they can offset in the winter.
Sounds like a squirrel storing his nuts in autumn for winter. Um, it's very interesting you talk about that because let's just pick up on 2 points. One that you said, the consumer. Consumers are getting more savvy, particularly business consumers, right?
Yes, we're seeing
So
that.
yeah, and as we're doing more data, and people may have heard about market-wide half-hourly settlement, which is coming, but for people who are not sort of that au fait with it, it's pretty simple. It's a question of trust. I buy from you, You say, I'm going to give you green power soon. I expect green power to mean, okay, what is green? Oh, you say, oh, it's coming from a wind farm, or it's come from a solar farm, or it's come from hydro. Done. Brilliant. Thank you very much. What you're saying is, I might have weeks, days, maybe even months in some cases, where that isn't the case. The power I need for my demand is coming from fossil fuels,
Hmm.
but there isn't anything, and it's not a legal point, but there's nothing from the supplier that says to you, by the way, today your power is not green because they
Mm.
don't have to, correct?
Correct.
So why is this not being looked at before we look at where you've come with your software? Why has this not been looked at? Because this has been happening for the last 4 or 5 years, and as
Hmm.
you say, it's gone on. The targets are there. Ofgem, DESNES, shouldn't even the supply, even Energy UK, shouldn't they all be looking at this?
Hmm. Yes, they should, and indeed they have. This is not a new problem. People have been talking about it in all of those segments for years. DESNES has run calls for evidence. I speak fairly regularly to teams at Ofgem. They track this. Suppliers are all over this as an issue. Um, the situation is nonetheless complex, and it takes some impetus to shake the status quo at times. And we believe that that's what Matched can offer, bringing public data, new public data. That's the other thing that's changed, is there's new data in the public domain.
Yeah, yeah.
So leveraging that and working with suppliers to make sure that we're telling the right story, and working with policymakers to ensure that we're pulling in the right direction, we believe that this could be the impetus that the market needs to effect change.
Let's talk about what you've come up with. So your background is, I said earlier, and you're very humble. You said you've only got one PhD, got loads. Um, you're from the world of kind of Tesla. You've been a data scientist, is that right? Just give people a bit of background because you're not actually an energy person, are you?
I'd call myself an energy person. Yeah, I've been in one form or another in energy for 20 years. I did begin out as a physicist on working on advanced photovoltaics, so quite a way removed from
Yeah,
grid operations. But then I spent 13 years in Silicon Valley, of which the majority was at Tesla, where I did all kinds of things, including managing several teams who built the optimization software for batteries, ranging from the small batteries that go in people's homes all the way through to the big grid-tied assets. We bought Tesla Megapacks to the UK in 2020 and integrated them with the balancing mechanism when that was still a fairly novel thing to do. My team's traded in Australia, Texas, California, other markets. So I've had my hands dirty. I've worked with power. I've traded in markets. I'm now back in the UK from Silicon Valley, and have been running an advisory service, dealing a lot still with grid scale storage, but spending more and more of my time over the last year on Matched.
but why? Why has this been something that you wanted to look at and devise this software? What's triggered you to do this from your experience that you've just talked about?
I'm phenomenally excited by the decarbonisation of the grid. It's been wonderful to watch, in particular, the decarbonisation of the UK grid. We've made tremendous progress, and yet we are only halfway there, and the next half of the journey is in many ways hardest. Intermittency of renewables is a fundamental issue.
Yep.
Flexibility and the temporal matching of supply and demand is a fundamental requisite for a deeply decarbonized grid. And yet, the language that we use, the accounting system we use to track renewable claims, ignores these issues. And we regard that as a major deficiency of the system and a huge lost opportunity. This is a £1 billion market that could be leveraged to accelerate the priorities that we have for 2030 and beyond. The fact that it's not is a huge missed opportunity. So by redressing, making this fairly simple change, annual reconciliation to half hourly reconciliation, the pieces are in place. We don't need to reinvent anything. We just need to shift that fidelity. We believe that we can really move the conversation forward.
Well, it's quite interesting. You know, we're going to look at it in a second. And if you're listening, we'll give you the details of the website. But if you're watching, you'll see a demo in a moment. But all of that I get, and I get your, the just cause, which I certainly support. But there's one thing thinking about all this, Joe, and actually spending hours coming up with this stuff, working really hard, like for a year. So what's been the driver? Is it because the gap in the market? Is it because you want consumers to feel trust? Is it because you think people are being, misled?
It's a lot of things. The ultimate goal is to accelerate grid decarbonisation. And although this is a somewhat technical issue, it's a very real issue. And it is indeed the case that, as the adage goes, you can't manage what you don't measure. Our measure of renewable claims is broken. And so from fixing it, which we believe we can be a part of, we believe we can unlock a whole bunch of further investment into grid infrastructure, innovation at suppliers and the offers they provide to consumers, which will ultimately change the consumer behaviors that are necessary, and invest in the storage that is necessary to provide the flexibility that the grid of the future requires.
Let's have a look at this. So, why don't you share the screen and explain to those who are watching how it all works? Give us an example of two suppliers. You don't have to name them, but one showing a lot of green power in the summer and not enough, and another doing it kind of constantly. So, explain where, first of all, for people who are going to look at this, what's this chart showing?
Yeah, let's walk through it. I'll zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, please.
So what we got in this purple line here is the aggregate demand that is being served by this supplier
Yeah.
to all of their customers.
Okay.
And you see the shapes you would expect to see.
Of
You
course.
see the daily shapes.
Yeah.
You see, you zoom out a little bit. You see the weekends. You
Yep.
zoom out all the way. You see the summer and the winter.
Gotcha.
That's what we got in the purple line. That's what the supplier is selling.
Right.
Zoom back in and let's look at what the claims that the supplier has on renewable energy as
Right.
tracked via these REGOs and then upsampled with various other data sets that are described here on our website. So we have a bunch of biomass, hydro, biogas, solar, and wind. And what we can see for the first time, this has never been done before, is the degree to which, on a half hour by half hour basis, the customer demand in purple is met by renewable generation sources, these colors. And you can see that this supplier does very well. The matching is very good. There are periods like this one here where there's actually an excess of renewable energy claims. And there
Gotcha.
are other periods like this white
Yeah.
segment here where there's a deficit. So in
So,
this case
yeah.
here,
Yeah.
should we talk about the deficit? Is that where
Yes,
you're going?
please. Yeah. The
Yeah,
deficit, is that where they have to fill from non-renewable sources? Is that what you're saying?
exactly. So that is grid residual would be the technical term.
Okay.
They're pulling from the grid, which is predominantly gas and nuclear.
Okay. So if you zoom out a little bit, but this supplier, you can see there's quite a lot of green, but there are big chunks of white. So
There are big chunks of white, but if you go out over the whole year, you can see that this supplier is doing an excellent job
yeah,
of matching the intermittent nature of renewables to the variations in demand from their customers. So if you were to add it up over the course of the full year and ask from a customer's perspective,
yeah,
of the power that I am receiving, what fraction of it is renewable? The answer is 88%.
that's very good.
Excellent. Truly, truly excellent.
Yeah. So they're providing 405 gigs on the right, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And of that, 88% over a year
Mm-hmm.
is renewable. But
Correct.
but what you're doing with matched is I can zoom in and I can find where I'm not. So let's go and find a bit where we're not. Just for example, where you show that white bit there. Now, I want to make clear, are you saying here this is a question of me as a consumer going, well, hang on a second, why am I not getting that? Is it a question of actually what you're trying to do is just give more information so everyone understands? Or is it also perhaps a way of, or doing all of these things, incentivizing suppliers to try and, for this one, just to make more of that 88 to get up to sort of 90, 95.
Hmm. Um, the most important thing to change, we think, is the metrics that we're using as the basis of renewable claims. Everything else will follow naturally. If we can update our semantics here, and rather than bandying around superficial and increasingly nonsensical claims of 100% renewable, if we can do away with them and instead start talking about the fraction of power that is actually renewable, 88% in this regard, then we believe all kinds of healthy changes will follow. Actually, we already start to see suppliers thinking differently about the way they are procuring their renewable energy claims, even just based on the work we've done. So we expect to see more of that. We speak to consumers and the organizations that represent consumers, particularly large corporate consumers. They are already starting to think differently about the way that they procure their clean power. And there are changes in the GHG. There are likely changes in the GHG protocol that will only accelerate that further. Furthermore, just shedding a light on this issue has
Yeah.
helped instigate conversations both at DESNZ and at Ofgem.
Let's look at another one, right? So
Very good.
that's a very good one, 88%. So let's look at another one that's not as good.
So
So
let's
this one can also claim to be 100% renewable, correct? This other
correct. So the last one we looked at is within the current regulation 100% renewable. So
Mhm.
if you go and look at their fuel mix disclosure, it will say 100% renewable. This one is also 100% renewable on their fuel mix disclosure, but you
Okay.
can see immediately that there's a difference in the quality of their power.
Enormous.
Again, we have in purple, we have the aggregate demand they're serving, and you
Uh-huh.
can see that systematically it outstrips the renewables they have a claim on. And
Yeah.
you keep on zooming out and you see actually what's going on is
Ah,
this summer month phenomenon. So in summer months, the grid is more often long and certificates are cheap, and there is a vast surplus of renewable claim in these summer months, which
brilliant.
gives you the 100% fuel mix disclosure at the end of the year, but is clearly non-physical. There's no way that customers of this supply could have benefited from this supply in the summer months, and very clearly they were short on renewable supply for the remainder of the year.
Your figures there, and now that chart again, for apologies for people who are listening, but we'll give you some details of the website. You can have a look at it afterwards. But if you're watching this, what a difference. So you can see that massive peak of excess green power and then the lack of it, the white on the right. But because there's so much on that side, even there from your calculation that you said 55% renewable, that's making up the other 45%, correct? That little peak there.
Yes,
Incredible. So totally legal, nothing wrong with what they're doing. They're not doing something wrong.
correct.
This is a facet of the measurement at present, which clearly, I mean, I think it says it always, not fit for purpose, is it really?
Correct. Yes, suppliers are perfectly within their right to do this. They're doing nothing wrong. The issue is the rules, and the rules are just very simply outdated. They had their time. They were more valuable 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but the rules just haven't kept pace with the vast changes on our grid over the last decade.
Thanks for sharing the screen there. Thank you. Let's talk about a couple of things that really strike me from that. Number one, should we stop the term 100% renewable? Because no one is.
Mm. That's our position. Yes, our position is that it's doing more harm than it is doing good now. We have a government that is driving very aggressive goals for 2030, and yet 20 or 30% of households are on a tariff that is ostensibly already 100% renewable. There's a vast disconnect here that is undermining very real priorities for us as a nation. And undermining the changes that are necessary in order to realize those priorities. We need flexibility. We need new offers from suppliers. We need to
Yeah.
reward the suppliers that are doing the most. All of that, all of those opportunities are being lost because of this very superficial and increasingly wrong claim to be 100% renewable.
In a way, you've highlighted something very interesting, which is that it's actually unjust for the good suppliers as well. Because
Absolutely.
yeah, they're working really hard. That other one's doing 88%, the other one's doing 55, and the 88%, in terms of how I see the consumer, they're both green.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We certainly one of the primary impacts we look to have is to recognize and reward the suppliers that are doing the most to decarbonize their power. And on the other side of the equation, we get consumers also asking for this information. So there's a matching problem here as well. You have consumers asking for the information, suppliers not quite able to give that information because of these
Yeah.
outdated rules. And so we can redress that, then we unlock a huge amount.
How solid is your science? That's the first question people are going
Yeah.
to ask. If I'm a supplier and I might be the 55, hang on a second, I don't agree with that. So where did you get the data from? How certain are you that this data is accurate? Because that's the fundamental part of how anyone would trust anything.
Yes, absolutely. We are certain in our methodology for the very simple reason that we've run it past hundreds of people in the sector and asked them to identify problems in it. Um, and of which 30 are listed on our website. You can go on to our website, match.energy/methodology. Our methodology is published there in full alongside over 30 experts who've reviewed the methodology in detail. We get our data from Ofgem, from
Yeah.
Alexon and NISO.
It's
We've
all public data then.
It's all public data. None of this relies on any internal data. It's all public data. We splice it together. There's a 20-page PDF on our website that explains how we do that and the limitations of that.
Right.
We can't
Yeah.
tell everything with our
No, I get that.
methodology. So we call out our limitations very, very specifically too. Um, and yes, we've run it past hundreds of people. So at this point, we have a good sectoral understanding of the value of public data, what can be determined from it, what cannot be determined from it. And it's with that confidence that we're releasing our results on October 27th.
For the suppliers, you'd end up, I'm sure you've probably thought about this, but you'll probably end up with two schools of thought. One is get stuff, Joe. Why are you why are you getting involved in this? We don't want to know about this. The other is people going, "Oh, we could have a league table and show that we're really good." So let's look at those two arguments. One, why are you getting bothered? Right? Some suppliers say, "What's it got to do with you?" What's your response to that?
I would just reiterate what I've said already about the societal challenge we have to drive decarbonisation. And
You're not trying to be anti-green. Let's be clear.
absolutely not. No, this is a very pro-green position that we're taking. We genuinely believe that renewables are the future. There is no doubt in our mind about that, and that we need to do everything we can to accelerate that future. And although there is going to be a little bit of pain inherent in resetting the conversation here, we
Yeah.
are going to have to go back and review the terms we have been using, 100% renewable, that this is a necessary step in order to move forward, not least to rebuild consumer trust in these renewable claims.
Gotcha.
Consumer trust in these claims is low. We see it in our
Yeah.
own market research, we hear from others doing market research. It's never been lower, and it's still going down. So we believe this is a necessary adjustment in the way that we talk about renewables. It's a necessary adjustment in order to then continue the next half of our journey, which is going from 50% renewables all the way up to 90%, 95%, 99%.
So if I was the boss, the CEO of the supplier you just saw, and 55%, what you're trying to say is, I don't want to highlight you as being bad. You want to help me to just see where I could do more. Is that do you see what I'm trying to get to? What's the message that CEO should take from what you're trying to do?
Yeah, let's talk. Let's review these numbers. Let's work out how we can improve them if that's something you want to do. Um, and yeah, let's talk about the future and let's talk about how you want to share this message with your consumers. The reason we're launching this now rather than this time last year is we've
Yeah.
been trying to have as many of those conversations as possible with suppliers. In the ideal world, we're not telling this story. Suppliers are telling this story. We've been giving them that opportunity.
How has that feedback gone? How have you had positive? Has it been mixed? Have you had some people saying no, I don't want to get involved? What's the score before you launch?
It's been a whole mixed bag. Some suppliers have been super engaged in this initiative right from the beginning. Three of them are listed on our website. They've contributed a lot to the development of the methodology. We are grateful for their contributions. We expect to be naming a few other suppliers before we launch on our website. Other suppliers have been interested but not been able to make quite so much time for it. And then, unfortunately, there are a few suppliers that we haven't yet managed to make contact with. We hope to make contact with them sooner rather than later.
The second point, a league table, just like the Premier League or whatever. Is that what you think this could lead to? So that I, as the consumer, can see. Because again, I suppose there's two parts to that, which is one, that's great. You can really see who's doing it. But if you're at the bottom of that, you might feel like, well, bloody hell, this is really going to screw my kind of, ability to attract clients and
hmm
customers.
hmm yes, there's going to be on October the 27th, we are launching the Matched Clean Power Index. So there is indeed going to be a list of 26 suppliers and the degree to which they are renewable, with 88% at the top and 0% at the bottom. And we appreciate that that is not going to be easy for everybody.
No.
We've done our very best to give everybody advance notice to incorporate their feedback where they have it. We do believe that ultimately it is necessary to have this level of visibility and transparency. We believe that customers deserve it, and we believe that leading suppliers need it.
So you will publish names when you go live.
Yes, we will.
It's going to cause a stir, Joe. You ready for that?
Um, we're trying our very best to ensure that lands in a constructive and positive way. We regard this as a success story. We view the fact that you can receive power that is genuinely 88% renewable, and there are other offers out there that are 85%, 80% renewable. There's no shortage of offers that are well over 70% renewable. That is a
Mm,
tremendous success story. We also believe it's a tremendous success story that consumers can be offered this level of visibility. The UK
yeah.
is unique in the availability of data in the public domain. We believe that it is very much in the consumer's interest to have this level of information, and we look forward to bringing the same level of transparency to other markets in the future.
Before we end, what do you hope to get once this is published? Do you hope to have, because at the end of the day, this is all great and it'll be interesting for consumers to look at it. We'll obviously be hoping to have in the index on Energy Live News, and we can sort of share with our database and our viewers and listeners. But unless the law is changed, the
Mm,
measurement is changed, the terms like 100% renewable REGO gets redrawn. That's all in the hands of the politicians, isn't it? So
mhm,
you're going to have, you may win sort of, cause a stir in turn of opening up the debate,
mhm.
but, suppliers play by the rules. The rules will need to change.
Yes, absolutely. That's part of our game plan. Our plan is to effect market change, both on the consumer side and on the supplier side. And as I say, we're beginning to see changes already on both sides. Changing in the rules, updating regulation is part
Yeah.
of that. Effecting widespread market change does require a change in regulation. And that's why we've invested a lot of time in speaking to policymakers.
Um, are you doing this for money?
We are structured as an independent not-for-profit necessarily because we are inviting the sector
Yeah.
to adopt public data passed through this methodology as a way of providing verifiable ratings of renewable supply. So necessarily, in order to gain the trust that is required from the sector, everything has to be in the open. Our methodology is open source, and we need to remove, to the greatest extent possible, all commercial constraints. So independent, not for profit.
That is a big thing because people say, "Are you sponsored by anyone? Is there someone sitting behind all this? And where will all that data go?" But I suppose if the data is in the public domain, all you've done is collate it and
Yes,
make it very smart, easy way to present it.
correct.
5 years from now, this is all gone. We're all across this. This index is part of how I pay my bills and everything. What is success in 5 years?
I mean, one way of describing success is that Match no longer exists because the regulation has been updated and these ratings are provided by Ofgem as a matter of course.
And that the grid is much greener because
The grid is much greener.
yeah,
Consumers know what they're getting. Suppliers are competing not just on superficial claims, but they're competing on percentage points. Who's 80%? Who's 85%? Who's 90%?
I think it's a very interesting concept, and I think you're going to cause a stir here. How do you feel about it all after putting quite a lot of time into it?
We are nervously excited. We believe we've spoken to enough people and we have enough of the sector behind us, including several suppliers, that we believe we can land this in a constructive way. Obviously, there are other voices in the UK right now in particular, so we are aware of the risk that this story is misappropriated. We're doing everything we can to mitigate that risk. We regard this as a success story, and we're going to be pushing it as hard as we can in that framing.
Joe, I think it's brilliant. It's very clever. We'll be talking a lot more about it. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast this week.
My pleasure, Sumit. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Let us know. You'll be able to see it on Energy Live News very soon once it's out there. And if you are listening to this and you didn't get to see all that wonderful bit that Joe showed, are those examples going to be on the platform where people go there now, Joe?
Correct. Match.energy.
Matched.energy. Go and check it out, viewers and listeners, and let us know what you think. It'll be very interesting. Get in touch. As usual, nethero@futurenetzero.com. My thanks to Rob for the production this week, and we'll catch you next time round.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from FutureNetZero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. FutureNetZero.com. Better business, better planet.